Welcome to Good Soil Talk Double A, the first in a five-part series called Christianity, a Reboot. My name is Ron Rude. I'm a campus pastor at the University of Arizona in Tucson, called and supported by a branch of Lutheran Christianity called the ELCA. In these five Good Soil Talks, my intention is to shake things up a bit and to articulate an alternative version of the Christian faith, that is, of God's story of life and God's story of Jesus. There is a persistent question for me that is propelling this project, and the question is this: what might Christianity look like if we were to take the natural sciences more seriously? I'm thinking especially of astronomy and physics and evolutionary biology, geology, and paleoanthropology. These fields of studies are reshaping how we understand God's world and our place in it. Our worldviews are different from how the inspired writers of the Bible saw things. And so we ask, should this affect how we understand the Christian faith? I think so. I'm a Christian pastor, so I bring this to the table with a Lutheran slant, certainly. These talks may be challenging for you, but I hope in a good way. So here we go. The first thing to be said is that Christianity, and Judaism too, are modern religions. That is, they haven't been around very long. When I say this, I'm thinking in the context of a much larger story. That is, that God's universe has been around for at least 13.7 billion years. Think of it. This is how long the divinity has been creating, engaging, forgiving, inspiring, renewing, loving, guiding, all that is, seen and unseen. In our own particular solar system, this has been around for about 4.6 billion years. Since Earth orbits the Sun once per year, this means that Earth has gone around the Sun 4.6 billion times. About 3.8 billion years, something quite remarkable occurred. Life. How did this happen? How did non-life become life? So far, nobody knows how that's done. But it happened. Praise God. This single-celled life dwelt only in the oceans. And besides learning how to live, they had a lot to do with creating and eventually oxygenating Earth's atmosphere. Thank goodness for this, huh? It took about 3 billion years for this to be accomplished, and for this single-cell life to have learned how to cooperate sufficiently in order to become multiple-cell life. And what an amazing breakthrough this was. Then life began to move on to land about 395 million years ago. First bacteria and fungi and mosses, then vascular plants like ferns, which paved the way for insects and spiders, and eventually invertebrates and vertebrates. To navigate land, life had to learn many new strategies. For example, how to stay hydrated. Or it had to develop new structures for body support because gravity works different on land compared to underwater. And it needed new ways of regulating internal temperatures. Transportation was a challenge too, getting around, as was finding and digesting food, and even reproduction. Dinosaurs and reptiles appear to have been around about 295 million years ago, with small mammals on the scene about 195 million years ago. Then, in 65 million BC, a giant asteroid struck this third rock from the sun. Wow. 6 miles wide, this colossal chunk of rock and ice from outer space hit the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, sending tons and tons of debris and sulfur and carbon dioxide high into the atmosphere. The resulting blockage of sunlight disseminated food sources, and the carbon dioxide, which had been safely sequestered in the limestone deposits of the ocean floor, was now released into the air. 70% of all life forms on Earth were reduced to extinction as the result of this catastrophe, including the dinosaurs, except for certain smaller dinosaurs that survived and eventually evolved into today's birds. Larger mammals began emerging in the millions of years after this, including primates about 20 million years ago. Our own immediate predecessor species, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, seem to have been around about 3 to 4 million years ago, along with about 13 other cousins, all of whom have since become extinct. The species Homo sapiens, that's us, has been around for about 200,000 years, including a more modern version with certain language abilities and ranges of expression and symbolic thinking for about 70,000 years. You can see how our species, like every other plant and animal species on Earth, has roamed and migrated over many tens and thousands of years. And of course, many newer species have come on the scene since our arrival. So when I say Judaism and Christianity are modern, new religions, you can see that they've only been around for 3,500 and 2,000 years respectively. I mean this in the context of God's much larger story. So we might ask, what prompted these religions to come on the scene? If you are a person who believes in God, as I do, the question might be, well, why did God decide to act in this way then, and why so recently? What prompted God to inspire these religions? And if you are a person who has a hard time accepting the possibility of a divine being and feel that religions are really human constructs, your question might be better put this way. What was going on in human cultures at that time in history that may have prompted perhaps wiser women and men to devise these religions, these ways of being, these understandings of the earth themselves and the universe? Well, I don't have the answer to these questions, but I do have a theory, and this will be the focus of these 5 Good Soil Talks. And the theory is this. These modern religions emerged recently as a response to our recent decline, devolution, regression as a species. Maybe not so much in terms of smarts, we are plenty smarts, but in terms of intelligence, and even more significantly, in terms of wisdom. These religions came on the scene, I'm suggesting, to address a disturbing regression that was gaining traction and spreading from human culture to human culture. So let's explore this. You know, it takes a lot of smarts to make a Coca-Cola commercial. To associate a mixture of water and mostly unhealthy chemicals with a person's ability to find meaning and purpose in life and even romance. A lot of smarts goes into pulling this off. But the fact that we fall for this trick shows, doesn't it, that at least present-day modern Homo sapiens have a high level of low intelligence. Here's another example, more serious. Currently, 9 nations harbor nuclear weapons of mass destruction aimed at God's creation. This means that these countries, including the United States, have in place policies that say, if our lifestyle is threatened, we will not only commit mass murder against those who threaten us, but we will commit genocide and ecocide against large swaths of God's creation, including humanity, and maybe even destroy Earth's biosphere for thousands and thousands of years. Again, it takes a lot of smarts to make even one of these weapons, let alone a doomsday arsenal. But the fact that these nations have empowered mere generals to obey orders from mere politicians to launch such demonic technologies, and that citizens in these countries are so numbed that they hardly even think about it much. Well, both intelligence and wisdom, not to mention honor and integrity and ethics, seems to have vacated the souls of the human creature. Another example, there wasn't too long ago that the soils of this North American continent were rich and verdant and teeming with life, and kept that way by meandering rivers and streams and creeks and cycles of nature's wisdom that included annual flooding. and the beavers and their beaver dams played a huge role in creating and maintaining this land of abundance. Well, first came the trappers, who in a very short while decimated precious beaver populations, all to get stylish furs for wealthy people. Then the Army Corps of Engineers and other entities came with shovels and bulldozers to straighten out and increase the speed of waterways so that now, because of these speedier and straighter water courses, each year tons and tons and tons of rich and alive topsoil rushes away from the continent's interior regions, spilling down into the oceans. Smarts? Yes. But intelligence? Wisdom? Hardly. And finally, normally each year, a few dozen species of the 20 million or so on Earth naturally go extinct. We need to remember that the notion of evolving life, that is evolution, is not so much survival of the fittest as it is survival of those species that fit in. And for whatever reason, each year a couple dozen species no longer fit in. However, currently, because of human misbehavior, about 80 species per day are dying out, gone forever because of humans. Is there something awry in this behavior? And speaking as a Christian here, since as Christians we seem to be doing about as much damage as anyone to God's creation, is there something terribly awry in our own understanding and practice of the Christian faith? I think so. So, what is at the heart of this recent human regression that I'm suggesting Judaism and Christianity came on the scene recently to address? At the core of this regression, in my view, is a worldview that positions humans as superior. A worldview that also has a lot to do with the sin of patriarchy and all its derivative, destructive tentacles. A worldview that positions humans at the head of the class, the front of the line, the top of the toppest, rather than embedded in God's creation with all other creatures in God's household. In God's household there are many dwelling places, about 20 million actually, and our species gets one of these. So how are we doing in terms of being responsible housemates? In other words, rather than God's creation belonging to God for the sake of the whole community of life, including us, we have a right to be here too, this new and devastating narrative emerged which claimed that Earth belongs to humans. In the next Good Soil Talk, Double B, I'm going to explore this narrative further and what the Bible describes as the fall.